Order, please. On convening the regular session of the Oregon City Commission for October 16, 2013. Would you give us a roll call, please?
Commissioner Smith?
Here.
Commissioner Roth?
Here.
Commissioner Mum?
Here.
Commissioner Pauley?
Here.
Mayor Neely?
Here. With that, would you join me in the flag salute?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We have a few proclamations and some exercises and an update that'll precede our citizen comments. The first one is, whereas the Society of American Magicians was founded in 1902 with magicians in every state in the Union, and whereas members of the Society of the American Magicians, both professional and amateur, generously offer their time and talent for charitable purposes, providing entertainment for children and adults, and whereas magic is an ancient and delightful form of entertainment which continues to give much pleasure to the old and young, and whereas the Society of American Magicians encourages youngsters to develop self-esteem through performance of magic, and whereas the Society of American Magicians is dedicated to evaluating the art of magic with its endowment fund, providing educational and humanitarian assistance to its members, and whereas National Magic Week allows magicians to share with others the great art form of magic. Now, therefore, I, Doug Neely, Mayor of Oregon City, hereby proclaim the week of October 25th and through 31st, 2013 as National Magic Week, and encourage residents to enjoy and recognize magic as wholesome and fun entertainment. And therefore, I'll be signing this today, the 16th of October, 2013. Now, I will not be here during most of that period. Well, I guess I will be, but in any case, there was a feeling here that I ought to demonstrate a magic trick. Now you see it. Now you don't. Are you satisfied, Commissioner Smith?
Not really.
Didn't quite cut it, did it?
You can declare it National Magic Week.
What?
How can you declare it National Magic Week?
Because I did.
Because I did. Okay.
Proclamation for the sister cities, Tateshina, Japan, and Sister Oregon City, Oregon. Whereas the sister city relationship between the city of Oregon City and the town of Tateshina Machi, Japan, was established in 1974 to promote friendships and understanding between the two communities, thus entering into our 40th year of that relationship. And whereas each community has developed programs as part of the cultural exchange to celebrate and deepen the bonds of friendship, including periodic visits by government officials, citizens, and students. And whereas Tateshina sent 8 junior high school students and 2 chaperones to visit Oregon City and stay with host families in 2012. And whereas Oregon City last sent a delegation, including then Mayor Alice Norris, to visit Tateshina and to stay with host families in 2007. And whereas Oregon City wishes to convey to Tateshina its commitment to the sister city relationship and to reaffirm and expand its friendships with the people of Tateshina. Now, therefore, we, the City Commission of Oregon City, hereby proclaim its intent to continue the sister city relation, and in so doing is sending the Chief Executive Officer of the city, David W. Frazier, City Manager, to visit Tateshina to convey this message of friendship and mutual respect, and to wish continued health and prosperity to the citizens of Tateshina. In witness thereto, I will be setting my hand to this on the 16th day, 2013. Do you want to say anything at this point, David, or not?
Well, the principal reason I was originally going to Japan was to represent the International City Manager Association in a 9-member delegation going there. And because Tateshina is only 150 miles from Tokyo, where this is a knowledge information exchange between ICMA and members of Japanese government to get best practices from one another, I simply only had to stay 2 additional days to travel over to Tateshina. And we have a gift, as you know, from the council that there's an Afghan with the city logo on it that was handmade by one of our residents. And we'll be taking that along with your proclamation, and I'll be presenting that to the city while I'm there. And it's a small delegation we're sending, but it was a great opportunity for us to do that in a sort of an inexpensive way for the city. So the city share of the trip is the airfare, and the ICMA picks up the rest. So
Thank you. Well, please send our regards to everybody.
I
that
will
you
do
meet
that.
there.
We also have other gifts. We have a blue heron made out of Oregon myrtle wood, a little ornament that we'll be bringing, and then our police department was kind enough to give us some pins from the police department. They're basically a memorial coin, and I don't know if you've seen them before, but we're going to make sure you see those. And they're just a really nice gift, and we're going to bring those. Gifts are very important in Japan, and the packaging of the gifts even is more important than what the contents. So we've been working on that too.
I believe myrtle wood is not indigenous to Oregon City.
It's indigenous to Oregon.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Yes, yes,
Anyway.
yes.
So
And now we're about to declare an emergency.
Okay.
Chief Bend.
Okay, Mayor, Commissioners, good evening. So, as our emergency operations plan requires that we train twice a year. As part of that training, we are going to take part in a regional event called the Big Shakeout. That's going on tomorrow. And as part of that training, as part of the exercise, what we're going to ask you to do is do a draft version or a drill version of a emergency declaration. And Martin is going to walk you through the process and kind of explain what we're doing.
Okay, Commissioners, thank you for your time. Martin Montalvo, I'm the Operations Manager for the Public Works Department. As Jim stated, we're taking part in the Big Shake tomorrow. We as an organization, the city, taken 3 different steps to address emergency preparedness for ourselves and for our community. The first of these you guys are taking part in, which is the actual emergency declaration simulated. I need to state that. That we're going to be utilizing tomorrow and loading up into the computer system that we use to communicate with the other communities in the region for the disaster. We're doing a 4-hour tabletop exercise tomorrow with the city's command and control structure, where the majority of the directors, the city manager, several other managers will be attending, and we're going to be drilling them through the process of how we would respond as an organization to restore civil society for our community. And then the last part is we're asking all staff tomorrow at 10:17 to partake in the Great Shake, just so we practice our situational awareness for a seismic event. So if you're in the building tomorrow at 10:17, there'll be an email that comes out just prior to that time advising everybody that we're getting ready to do our duck, cover, and hold exercise and to participate. So if you see that, we're not being robbed. We're just participating in the exercise. So this is a regional event that we're doing with the county. There are 11 other municipalities participating, and it goes on throughout the country and internationally as well. So for your part, we're going to walk you through the process of declaring a local state of disaster, a declaration of emergency, and kind of demystify and talk to you guys about some of the responsibilities and some of the limitations when you go through this process. So the first of these is under Oregon law, you're authorized to do this, to declare a local state of emergency. And there's a process for this and who's allowed to make these declarations. So the first person is obviously the mayor. In the absence of the mayor, the commission president can make the declaration. Either of these venues all require ratification by a quorum of the commission within 48 hours. Okay? In the event that the emergent conditions are so significant that we cannot get to the mayor or to the commission president, the city's emergency operations plan and our city emergency powers ordinance authorize the city manager or their delegate to declare a local state of emergency, again, having to be ratified by a quorum within 48 hours. So the delegates In our emergency operations plan, you've got the city manager, you have the chief of police, you have the chief of Clackamas County Fire District, and you also have the public works director, are all authorized to declare this in the event of a disaster. Certain things are required within the declaration. First of these being, what are the existing conditions that require you to declare a state of emergency? What has happened that are so egregious to require this extraordinary step? Secondly, what are the boundaries of the declaration? Are you declaring it across all political boundaries or certain portions of your community? And then lastly, what are the emergency powers that you intend to utilize during this declaration? And those are all enumerated for you in Sydney Ordinance. It's Chapter 2.52. And the example declaration that we've provided for you as part of your packet actually has the emergency powers that we're going to be utilizing tomorrow during our exercise. So what is the benefit of declaring a local state of emergency? First thing is it opens you up to various avenues of funding and powers that you normally do not have. Some of these are, we're allowed to divert funds, take emergency funds and utilize them for the response phase. We can authorize extraordinary law enforcement measures. We can use resources that we normally wouldn't have access to, allow us to activate our mutual aid agreements. It gives us legal protections against some of the actions that may be taken in response to the emergency. Examples, public works or the PD having to set foot on private property without prior authorization from the property owner. All these things are permitted under the emergency powers. Lastly, but almost most importantly, it allows us to get access to state and federal dollars to help mitigate for the disaster response. Yes?
Question, I'm going to put on my emergency management hat here. Are people in Tony's department ATC 20 and 45 trained?
We're going through, and it's been a while since our departments have been trained, and so we're going.
Got a 3-year window that the certification is only good for 3 years. If you do not have ATC 20 training, it takes you out of federal funding, and it takes you out of the Good Samaritan laws. So you just might want to, there'll be training at Clackamas this week, next week. You may want to get somebody there.
Those are some of the things that we're going to be discussing tomorrow during our tabletop exercise, is what training is required amongst the various departments
Yeah.
and what plans we have in place.
That takes you out of any federal funding if you don't have that training.
So what is the a disaster declaration process? First thing is we need to make a local decision. We decide that the events that are currently being experienced have exceeded our capability to take care of without some form of assistance. So we declare a local state of emergency. From there, it's processed through to the county via the EOC, and then the hope is that the emergent conditions are regional, and then the county declares a local state of emergency within the county, and then passes that on to the state. Once it's received at the state level, then the governor's office reviews it for sufficiency, and then they have the opportunity to declare a state of emergency within the state of Oregon. That opens our first window for funding opportunities for mitigating against emergent conditions. And then lastly, it makes its way to the President of the United States via FEMA, and then we're hoping for a federal declaration for a disaster. So this is the process for opening up a lot of the windows for mitigation. So again, some of the examples of things that we're looking at with the emergent powers. The city can choose to declare a local state of emergency even if we do not intend to seek additional support or resources. What it allows us to do is just utilize those emergency powers within our local community, but we can handle the entire situation amongst ourselves. The scenario that we're going to be playing tomorrow plays to that kind of situation. So some examples are, we can handle the majority of it, but we feel we need to have a curfew to keep people off the streets because we've lost power for the region. Other things is we can close facilities after certain hours, and it allows us to commit to mutual aid, to receive and to give mutual aid. Okay, and then the other thing that's important to note is that even though you are declaring a local state of emergency, you are not ceding responsibility for responding to it to any other party. The emergency is local. We are responsible for dealing with it locally. What the feds come in and do is they provide you the logistical and resource assistance that you need, but your consolidated, your command that you have is still responsible for addressing all the emergent conditions within your local community. So these are the command staff responsibilities that we're going to be flexing tomorrow during our 4-hour exercise. And we've got each of these seats are sat in by various department heads within the city. And we're going to be flexing all of that for about a 4-hour period tomorrow. We just wanted to give you kind of an idea of what the command structure is for that. Some more of the emergency powers that are authorized. We can circumvent the normal procurement guidelines, so it allows us to select and direct the contractors that are available and can respond within a timely manner. And it allows us to enter into agreements that we normally would not be able to enter into. For instance, we could commandeer some construction equipment from a local construction company saying we need it, city crews are going to utilize it, we're going to pay you a reasonable compensation at the end of the disaster event. Then the other thing to remember is the emergency declaration is only valid for 48 hours. Okay, that goes back to that the City Commission must ratify the initial enactment within that time period. But if we intend to extend it beyond that initial 48 hours, we have another 48-hour clock, and then we have to keep enacting this emergency declaration until we feel we no longer need the emergency powers. Okay? And that's the end of our presentation. So tomorrow we're going to be kicking off at 0900 at the Emergency Operations Center, and I'll be there for most of the day, and we'll probably have an after-action report that we'll be bringing back to the City Commission to let you know what our intended plan of improvement is. I'll be happy to take any questions.
We oftentimes think of these emergencies as natural disasters. Are acts of insurrection or violent civil disturbance bases too, I presume?
Yep. Those are all covered under your emergency powers, and you can enact a local state of emergency to respond to those.
Mayor, if I may, we also have one of the most common questions we have when a new commissioner comes on to the commission is, what do I do in the event of one of these emergencies? And it's pretty simple. It's simple enough for us to actually get it on a laminate card, so we have that along with emergency contact numbers on the back. And I know a lot of you have smartphones, but those don't always work in an emergency, so we made these up and we can pass those around.
Yeah.
This is very good. Thank you.
You're
I
welcome.
appreciate all this.
Is there anything else then?
No, just they're going to do the declaration, correct?
Yep.
Okay.
So the process would be that the city manager brings you the emergency declaration, enumerating what's the situation, the geographic boundaries, the powers that we propose to enact, and then the mayor will read the proclamation, and then within 24 hours we have to publicize it within the local media that's available.
Okay. Somehow I'm not picking this up. There we go. I'll try one more time. Okay. Okay, here's what it is. Just a minute. There we go. Yep, yeah, it's there. At 4:35 a.m. on October 17, 2013, a seismic event of a reported 6.8 magnitude occurred in the city of Oregon City, threatening life and property. The epicenter of the event is reported to have occurred within the southern edge of the Portland Hills Fault Line, which terminates in the vicinity of Oregon City. The current situation and conditions are extensive damage to local and regional transportation system, including Highway 99E and State Road 213, the Oregon City Westland Bridge, extensive damage to the city's municipal water water distribution and sanitary collection systems, localized interruption to electrical and natural gas services, extensive structural damage to both public and private facilities, no reported fatalities to date. City Emergency Operations Center has been activated and command staff have been convened. The geographic boundaries of the boundary are the political boundaries of the city of Oregon City. We do hereby declare that a state of emergency now exists in the city of Oregon City, and that the city has experienced or will shortly expend its necessary and available resources. We respectfully request that the county provide assistance, consider the city an emergency area as provided for in OR 401, and as appropriate, request support from the state agencies and or the federal government. And then this is signed by the appropriate authority. So this is not a real emergency statement. This is an example. I don't know that we've ever seen this the time I've been on the commission, so I appreciate having this before us.
It's very good. Thank you.
Very helpful. I have to comment that I happened to be in the office here when we had one of these mock emergency events, and we were supposed to get a desk, which David Frazier and I did. And there is a picture of David and Frazier and I under the desk. Now the question is, who took it?
Who took it?
So
And
anyway,
why were they not under
and why
our
were they
desk?
not under the desk?
Guilty as
Well,
charged.
it was actually the city recorder's desk we got under, and I don't really think she felt that it was appropriate for her to join us under those conditions.
The
But,
only
wouldn't
disappointing
fit.
thing was that my nameplate wasn't on the desk at the time.
anyway,
Only kidding.
No, I really appreciate all
Yes,
the
this is
work,
great.
and I have never seen this before us, so this is perfect. Thank you.
We intend, our plan is to be flexing our emergency exercises at least once a year, citywide,
Good.
with departments doing smaller events within their own jurisdiction.
That's great. I appreciate that.
Thank
Martin
you.
came to, he doesn't work for me, so I'm not bragging on somebody who works for me, but he came to us from Florida, so he
Yes.
knows his stuff very
Oh, boy, I
well.
bet
he Yes.
He put this
Yes.
whole thing together. They had hurricanes like every weekend down there. So,
I need to make a disclaimer that just being from Florida does not make you an emergency manager. I was the deputy director of emergency management back in Hillsborough County, as well as a manager within the Public Works Department for several years. So being a resident of Florida does not necessarily
it's
qualify.
close though.
It's close. Close enough.
This is great. Thank you.
Thank you so
Thursday
much.
night, I went to an emergency operations for elected and appointed officials from put on by Clackamas County. So it's great to see that our city is up to speed and has a plan.
And if I can just add one more comment, I do want to give a great appreciation to Clackamas County Emergency Operations Center and their staff, Terry Poet in particular, and Nancy Bush, for coordinating this regional exercise. So we've been coordinating all of our efforts with them, and we'll actually be playing with them throughout the day tomorrow, both through telephone, radio, and internet.
Good.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you. We requested an update from our Public Works Director on the McLaughlin Phase 2 project. We requested partially because, of course, there's a lot of public input, but the commission itself had some recommendations, and we wanted to follow up on that in terms of the Phase 2 in general.
So I'd like to, Mayor, if you don't mind, I'd like to cue this up just a little bit. We've got Scott Dreyer here from David Evans and Associates, and of course, you know Eric Wargren from Oregon City Public Works. They're going to go through the lion's share of the presentation, but yeah, we are bringing this back because it was brought back. You raised it as something that you wanted to hear back before us, and at the time I said it would come before you when the contract was awarded, and I was when I talked to Eric about that a little bit, he reminded me, well, this is an ODOT contract, and so it won't actually come back to the city for approval. So they're going to go through those details with you. I think there was some other issues that were that we subsequently had a conversation about with regard to TriMet services. And so I want to cue this conversation up to give you an update, but then I'm hoping there'll also be a conversation about TriMet services in Oregon City and how we might enhance those, because I think that's really one of the leading things that kind of brought this this update back to you.
You're right.
So, Scott, you want to
Take it off?
take it on?
All right, I'll give you a brief overview, and then we'll go into an update on this project. We started out this project about a year ago, brought on a group of PSU students, put on a competition. The public chose a winner, and we were able to incorporate some of the design elements of this design. This was our presentation at the public meeting. We had a couple public meetings. The first one was to get input, and the second one was to give a construction schedule and let everyone know what we arrived at for our design. There are a few elements on this photo board that are being added to this project. I'm not sure how many went to the public meetings or how many are up to date on what we've added to the project. This is the Clackamas River Bridge here, traveling southbound into Oregon City. The bridge over Main Street, Clackamas Drive, and then coming past the shopping center there on the left-hand side. The majority of the architectural features start pretty much at this second bridge, going south to Dunes Drive here, and then down Dunes Drive. We've got, start with this picture up here, we've got new fencing going in all along. The chain link fence will come out. I think there's a 6 feet rusted chain link fence out there now. That'll come out, be replaced with welded wire, 4 foot tall, so you'll be able to look over it. Lots of planting, trees, street side, 6 foot separated sidewalks at a minimum, going as wide as 15, 20 feet at this corner here, where we have a lot of interaction of people. Once we cross the bridge, we get into the design element that kind of wanted for one of the pieces that was in the winning proposal for the student, and it was kind of a variable sidewalk. It's a planter strip. It lends itself to be kind of meandering. It'll have that look, but it'll provide nice wide sidewalks for the public. It'll create somewhat of a buffer from the road. Heavily planted, low maintenance. Maintenance was a huge concern when going through this project. And then there'll be trees again on the street side, and then bushes and plants on the back side. Trying not to block the view of the river. Really, that was the point of this, was to allow the pedestrians to walk up and down this boulevard, take in the view of the river, and not feel that they were directly on the roadway there. As we approach the corner of Dunes, this is where most of the kind of the architectural features, or your gateway feature, kind of coming into Oregon City. We widened this out quite a bit. You have a bus stop here, you've got McDonald's interaction, the shopping center going through there, and it just is a busy corner. There's a nice flat area up the top, and then kind of a rock. It's not exactly like this, and it'll be planted, but it's kind of seating, kind of stepping down. There won't be a fence there to block your view or obstruct your path. And then over on this side here, we've got a weathering steel. Kind of show you weathering steel architecture. I don't want to call it artwork. We got in trouble for calling it artwork. It's architecture. ODOT doesn't allow art on public right-of-way, but architecture they do. You can kind of see a little picture of it up here. It's kind of hard to see at this scale, but this is a cross section. If I go back here, if I were to cut a section through here and a section through here, that's these next two. So you can see if you come off the bus, you'd walk in this wide plaza area where bikes and pedestrians could pass. There's either a stairway down, or there's going to be 2 entrances for ADA access. It'll be a ramp going down, very similar to the deck idea on phase 1, where you have a ramp going down, and then you can intermittently go down 3 sets of stairs here into this. There'll be a kind of a second walking area, which is down away from the road to kind of pull you away, and then this there'll be kind of a seating area, or just steps down that'll be heavily planted, looking out into the river there. And that's again all along this area here. This is kind of the ramp down the lower walking area, and then down Dunes Drive. And this is a kind of a profile view of what's going to be on the corner with the steel. The squiggly lines are just to mimic water. They're going to be laser etched and inlaid with a blue reflective acrylic. It's a low maintenance, but it should reflect some of the light, the ambient light in the area, kind of shown through. And then this is, go back here, this corner right here is this here. So you look at the steel pieces, you'll have a staircase, and then rocks and plantings.
These are architecture and not art?
It's all architecture. We don't have any art on this project. that word was removed from our plan set. Otherwise, none of this would be in there.
Does it make the artist happy?
We'll have to look up the definitions, I guess.
Of art, good luck.
Well, we're not hiring artists, right?
May I ask a question?
One thing, oh, sure. Yeah.
I had understood that we talked about you can go back on the other side of McDonald's. All right, yeah. I thought we were talking about some steps coming down in that area.
We did. So that fell out for two reasons. One, it took out quite a bit of area for development on that property, and it also was too expensive. The retaining walls were somewhere in the neighborhood of around $400,000 for both those.
Based on that same question, you said the fence that's currently there is huge and ugly. I understand that. The new fence would be how tall?
4 feet.
All right. I'm really concerned about that. I did go to some of the open houses, and I don't know if I stated that at those meetings, but one of the concerns with that obviously is the fence that currently exists is being hopped every day. Basically anywhere from the Gladstone Bridge into, I would say, the Main Street Bridge especially. Any kid that's going to the skate park hops that fence the way it currently is. At 4 foot, you could just assume that everyone's going to go over it. That worries me a little bit based on just the trails that'll be created, etc., down that cliff, which there's already a bunch anyway. Especially if there's not some sort of access in any other place, it even encourages that more. So I'm a little worried about that.
This was raised a couple different ways. One was there was talk about maybe providing an access at certain intermittent points. ODOT said absolutely not.
Right.
They keep a fence around their perimeter, keeping right-of-way separated. So it was a safety issue from their standpoint. Second one, we did look at, if you go with a taller fence, yes, it is harder to scale. 4 foot's still pretty tall. But there is no way where most of the trails are, and the reason the trail is here is because they actually were able to remove a post and roll back the fence.
Right.
This, good luck. Yeah, this is a rigid steel fence. It's more of a railing than a fence. It's not going to be your single post and about a foot of concrete where you can roll it back and they'll be able to get through, slide through. They will always be able to get through the bridge connections. The railing on the bridge is a set height for cars, and that is lower than the fence. It's somewhere around 42 inches. So there's no, in this area here, at this point where the other trail is, and this point here, no matter how high we put the fence, they're still just going to go around the 42-inch, nice rounded tubular steel on the bridge, and they're just going to swing on the fence post.
Does the fence stop at Main Street, or does it go through the McDonald's? I mean, how far does that fence go?
The fence goes
all
about
the
right
way.
there. Yeah.
Okay.
Until we can pick up a 3-to-1 slope. Most of this is a 2-to-1 or 1-to-1 slope. What it requires for safety, so that someone doesn't roll down it. Fence to separate there. So it was raised. We could have gone with a 6 foot. I don't. The 4 foot was. The 6 foot would have probably made you feel like you were in jail if you were walking through as an average person.
Which you do now.
Yeah, and the 4 foot kind of takes that away and opens it up.
Right.
There are going to be kids that they're going to hop a 6 foot too, but they will. We looked at these 3 areas as
Not
there's
just
no
kids.
way to block it. Well,
it's shocking to me, but I've been down there for events and seen people go over the fence with strollers and babies, and I've seen it to get to the parking lot. It's crazy, but
I'm not going to say the saying that I say, but I can't design for stupid.
Yeah.
Well, exactly.
We do our
You're right.
best.
Exactly.
You can
Nor
only
do I.
do the best.
Maybe we can
Yes.
electrify it.
Talking about moving the barb down, but yeah.
So this came up too. Like you said, another way was we had the barbs up. which would have made it tougher. ODOT brought that up as a safety concern.
Right.
Someone gets hung up on it, their arm
Right.
gets caught, so we
Yeah.
flip the fence around. So there's been probably not only your comment, but about 4 other ways.
Yeah.
I mean, John wanted a gate, a doorway, and ODOT shot that down. So we did not ignore your comment or the concern.
I have one other that probably won't be addressed, but we're not only creating a gateway to the city, but really a brand new gateway to Clackamas Park, which has a new gateway actually in the park itself, but especially the corner of Dunes Drive where you're coming into the park. Clackamas Park is becoming a major location for many community events, one of which just took place last week. And my only, I guess I wish I would have mentioned this before, as part of the design for that entryway, as an event planner, and I see Alice out there as well, there's a lot of events that take place at the park that have signage that goes up to promote the events that are in that park. In the past, they've gone up right on the fence, on that fence on the roadway, which sometimes ODOT comes along and tears them down because they're not really supposed to be there. So, in order to, I guess what one of the things would be great is if we could have considered some way to have some sort of ability to have some place for signage or something that is temporary signage for events that's going on at the park that is kind of designed in with those gateways to Dunes Drive. So that if there is a temporary event going on, the signage goes up, that it's not deterring from the architecture and the landscape that we've put in there, but it's also not being placed in places that are going to, that it would be on city property more so at the gateway into the park rather than other places.
One thought I had about that is, like the city of Portland, on front, they've got all the banners for when the marathon comes or those events happen. We
Street
will have the
banners
opportunity
instead.
to do that on McLaughlin with the new street lights,
Okay.
as well as Dunes. We'll have
Okay.
new street lights with
Great.
banner arms.
Great.
Right, streetlights have those arms on there. And then ODOT takes jurisdiction of this entire area, so we were hard pressed to put anything.
I'm sure.
Yeah. Stands vertical, gets in the way of traffic, sight lines.
Right.
But our design doesn't preclude any of that. I mean, you have some options. There's possibility for art being put into this, as a separate process, not involving ODOT necessarily.
Great, thank you.
And then you brought up, just kind of our schedule. Tomorrow is the advertising date. We've been climbing a mountain, and we were able to stay on schedule, and it will be a bid opening on November 7th. ODOT will go through their process, and around December, maybe beginning of January, the contractor is going to be awarded by ODOT. They'll go with the lowest bidder, and takes about a month or so to get the submittals in, get the permits for building, and the contractor realistically will probably start late February, early March when the season starts to dry a little. And we're looking at a one-season project to be completed by the end of the year. The majority of the project, including the paving that will be going on, will have to be done before the paving window closes in October 15th. Weather permitting. But so the majority of this work will be done right around October, early October.
One thing I'd like to add too is at the open house, and also we've been in contact with the Oregon City Shopping Center and talking with them about the construction and what that really means, and we'll continue to have those conversations as the project continues. So they're well aware, and we'll continue to inform them and work with them through the project.
That's good.
And then to touch on the TriMet subject, this corner right here that's kind of hidden by this photo came up as a concern for if TriMet turns their buses down Dunes Drive and decides to go around Clackamas Drive and maybe over to the Cove or whatever future development there is. We did look at that design. There's a couple different ways to handle it. We talked to TriMet. They can make that turn as it is today. If for some reason it's tight at all, we have up to 2 feet that we can just restripe and accommodate more of a turn movement. So what's out there now will accommodate a bus in the future.
Great. That's good.
How it accommodates is a concern of mine, because anybody that's been down there at 9th Street and Main, when bus 33 is making a turn, if cars don't stop further back, they cannot make that turn without going into the other lane.
So when we look at it, we talk with ODOT. They do a 3-lane maneuver. So if they leave, in this case, since you have a left turn and a right turn lane when you get down to Dunes, they'll more than likely straddle that lane. We've looked at it without them straddling that lane, and they come within about a foot on our modeling. Our modeling's conservative, so a real bus should be able to make that turn easily. But TriMet says their practice is to do a 3-lane maneuver where they tend to go into that other lane just to give them that extra room, and so they aren't clipping any cars or heading into head-on traffic when they go into Clackamas Drive. So they'll do 2 lanes into 1 lane, or they'll turn 1 lane into 2 lanes. And so we've accommodated what their routine practice is for their drivers.
One more question that I hope is redundant, but there's a picture down there of some trees covering up the intersection. I'm hoping there's not a roundabout under that picture.
No, that was gone long
Thank
time
you.
ago.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's not been in the picture for a while, right?
Well, you can't tell.
You can't tell.
Yeah, on purpose.
You never know.
You see what's under here.
Oh,
No secrets.
I have a question.
Yes.
As far as the construction schedule, do you know if there's going to be lane closures or what type of impact it's going to have on traffic and businesses?
Absolutely. There will be lane closures. This project is going to be much different than Stage 1. Stage 1 had barriers, it had lane shifting, it was a complete mess. And it was because of the amount of roadway work that was being done. This is a saw cut and widen just a little bit. So ideally, well, they're going to follow ODOT standards, which is take 1 lane between 9 a.m. and 3 p.m., I think, what's in our specification. So it's a short window during the day. They have to take the lane no earlier than 9, and they have to pick it up no later than 3, or they get a ticket or hauled off or to jail.
Right.
His job.
Jim's all over
theoretically.
that.
With the exception of maybe a few things, for instance, trenching of the utility across Dunes Drive. Also, the paving of the project is probably going to be maybe a week of grinding and a week of inlay. So there'll be a couple exceptions, but for the majority of the project, it will be the contractor taking a lane, saw cutting the pavement, widening it a little bit, putting in the new curb and gutter, and then opening it back up that evening for rush hour traffic. So every morning and every evening, you should have full lane capacity through that area.
Great.
Okay. And of course, there'll be all sorts of signs up educating people and letting them know what to expect.
There will, and we had a talk, with the OC Shopping Center representative and the contractor. They've talked about maybe a central place to put a flyer of the upcoming closures and just kind of where they're going to be with the schedule. We'll be meeting weekly, and I think the city will be attending some of those. But it just kind of the contractor does a 3-week look ahead. They do their best to project where they're going to be working. To the OC Shopping Center and the businesses had some concerns around some of the holidays, July.
Yes. Yes.
And those are handled in our specifications as well. Just as a standard, ODOT doesn't allow construction during the major holidays.
Good.
What about events that are already that will be at Clackamas Park as well?
So we have the city's identified 3 or 4 events, and they're in our specifications, and the contractor will have to come up with a construction plan or a traffic control plan that deals with those.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. I appreciate you bringing this update to us since we're out of the loop in terms of decision making.
Yes.
I think you've probably addressed our major concerns that have come through the commission meetings. The TriMet piece is very important because about I think it was roughly 2 years ago, the former Public Works Director Nancy Krashauer, City Manager David Frazier, and I met with Neil McFarland, the Director of TriMet, and he was getting our input of things that we thought was important. And having the bus service coming along the Main Street extension along the Cove and Inn was one of them that was listed, because we identified that as a mixed-use corridor, and one of the justifications for that kind of zoning is actually access to public transportation. And my hope is that as we have residential development and mixed-use development occurring there in the Cove area, that it will be served by TriMet. If it's not, I'm going to be extremely disappointed, because the stops they currently make are at the one bus stop you mentioned there. The next stop is the Transit Center itself, and directly across there at the Oregon City Shopping Center. So the stops would be the same whether or not they use that Main Street extension. And I hope TriMet consider those recommendations seriously. I recognize they're having fiscal problems at this point in the game, but we all have to think long term. And this is an important area. As the Blue Heron site develops, as the Cove develops, we expect more traffic and more demand for public transit services in that area.
One of the things that we're working on with TriMet is having them attend a City Commission work session, and won't happen in November. Our work session's pretty full. We put it on December. TriMet has yet to confirm that, but so I think either December or January we'll be able to get a TriMet work session pulled together with hopefully Neil, the General Manager Neil McFarland, to attend. Whether he's the one who's giving the presentation or not, I'm not sure, but just it would be nice to have their ear. It's not just been Main Street Extension that I've heard from all of you. There's other areas around town.
Yes.
So I don't know if you want
South Bend,
to
Holcomb.
expand upon that, but whatever you do, I'll clip that little piece of the meeting and send it to TriMet to make sure they get they hear it straight from you as well.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before I go into the citizen comments, I wanted to make a couple of announcements. It occurs to me that we probably should make announcements earlier anyway, because by the time we get to the announcements at the end, most of the people have left.
Yes.
I did want to emphasize that we do have the openings for next year's board.
I'm sorry, excuse me, Mayor. Paul Edgar had signed up. He's on there to speak to this.
This particular issue?
Yeah.
Okay.
I apologize.
Paul Edgar, come on forward. And this was the thing just presented, right?
Yes, thank you. Mayor and Commissioners, I've been actively involved in my name is Paul Edgar. I'm from Oregon City. I've been actively involved in transportation issues, and particularly I've been part of this process in the McLaughlin Enhancement Project. I know that of Metro federal highway monies that were brought in for transportation, this project represents about $3.5 million, and then $1 million of Oregon City urban renewal monies, to approximate numbers to make a $4.5 million project. And when you look at $4.5 million in improving transportation, in particular, those of us that are highly concerned about long-term economic development of such projects like Blue Heron, and if that were to generate 1 million more incidents of travel coming into Oregon City, a high percentage of that travel would be coming across the Clackamas River Bridge. And what we have is a major choke point right at this location, and we have no ability to get to the right two through lanes that lead towards Blue Heron. Oftentimes because of a very poorly designed interchange at I-205 and 99, and the way it's striped, cars back up clear across the Clackamas River Bridge, and there's a degree of turbulence where if you get too many people trying to get to 205 or to turn in one of these areas there, they just back up and backs up and backs up, and so we can't even get traffic then through this area. there would have been a simple solution. We've blown it in this southbound area. There's a big kickout, kind of an ODOT facility that should have been moved back. We should have moved it further to the west, right there, and created the ability for us to get at least 100 to 200 feet more of right turn lane area. When you compound that with that bus stop right there, where all the buses come in, when we're spending $4.5 million and we don't solve transportation problems through Oregon City that affect economic development, the creation of jobs, and the improvement of investment in Oregon City and Clackamas County, I think we're making a mistake. And I think that this particular project is an example of spending $4.5 million and not hitting the nail on the head. Yes, it's beautiful, but beauty and being smart sometimes have to have this coming together. And right now, I'm very, very concerned that when we block off the ability for people to come in, we know that we can't handle 1,000 more incidents of travel coming in at that place. And this is just a breaking point. And I implore you to say, okay, let's get smarter. It may not be the most beautiful thing, but I want jobs, I want investment, I want economic development, and I want us to turn on. And what we're doing is preventing that from happening. And once we sink this money in, it's going to be very hard to come back and plead with somebody when we need to correct it, that we want more money. And therefore, I would ask you to take a really serious look at this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any staff comment or not? No. Okay.
No.
Go ahead then. I wanted to announce the positions that we still have for next year's appointments to our boards. We have positions on all of them, I believe: Oregon City Improvement Trust, Historic Review Board, Library Board, Metro Enhancement Committee, Natural Resource Committee, Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee, Planning Commission, Transportation Advisory Committee, Urban Renewal Commission, and the Urban Renewal Budget Committee. Most of these are appointed by the mayor, but the Urban Renewal Commission openings are actually evaluated by the whole of the commission. It's a very important position, and two are open. I believe one of them will be a 2-year term and one of them a 4-year term, as I recall. Mm-hmm. No corrections, so probably. Yeah, I think that's correct. Right. Mm-hmm. But that's an important position, and the city commission makes the decision as to those positions. The deadline is, you still have time, October 21st for these particular applications. With that, we'll go on to citizen comments for items not on the agenda. And I'll go to the floor, and we have Alice Norse wishes to speak to us. We're seeing you more and more frequently these days.
Yeah, I don't know why. Alice Norris, citizen activist. Good evening.
You live where?
I live proud to say I live in Oregon City. And I'm here today with my hat on, I think, as president of the Willamette Falls Heritage Area Coalition. And the the Willamette Falls Festival is one of our programs, which we just had 2 weeks ago. So I'm here to say thank you to the city for being a strong supporter. And I have bribes for you, of course, so that you hopefully will do it again. I mean, we have gifts for you.
Well, we were not aware of these gifts ahead of time.
No, you were not. And we have one.
Oh, look at that!
One signed one. This is our commemorative poster that was designed by an artist.
Yes.
Our theme this year was our industrial heritage, and so we have one that I will give to the city manager that maybe you would like to frame for City Hall.
And there's no picture of an ODOT facility, so we have to call that architecture.
Right, it's not art, it's architecture. And, thank you. I'm going to hand these out to
I need the rubber band.
Oh, okay.
He's an engineer, remember?
Picky. Anyway, I wanted to say that I think the Willamette Falls Festival was really quite successful. I think about 6,000 people were there.
Oh, nice.
The things that were sold out were the tours that Tony and Christina did, and actually they added another one. So we 80 and 2 more tours. So we put 80 people that were very eager to see the Blue Heron site. And on the other side of the river, in the working mill, another 60 people got to go through that.
Nice.
The jet boat tours was a fabulous day for jet boating, so people got to experience
Yes.
the river.
Yes.
That was great. The fireworks were just spectacular.
Oh, they were beautiful.
They
Oh,
were.
yes.
They were amazing.
Wonderful. Yes.
And we tried to experiment this year, which I'm not positive we'll try next year, but this year we tried to sort of act like the Rose Festival, where you have sort of partner events, and I think those actually worked out pretty well. The Chamber had a biz fair at the Interpretive Center, and Lockfest on the West End side, I think, had a large number of people attending that as well to focus on industry. So I think everybody was really pretty happy. The event at the tent itself, I think, was rather light on attendance, but the rest of it was really a fun panoply of things. So again, thank you for your support. The City of West Lynn, City of Clackamas County, through its Tourism and Cultural Affairs, and Oregon City and Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde were the major funders, and we had a lot of other sponsors.
Yes.
But we'll be having our evaluation soon, and I assume we're going to do it again next year, probably on a consolidated site. So again, thank you, and I'll give you your
Before you leave, you might mention the Heritage Area Foundation, the Willamette Falls Heritage Foundation, had a dinner, and its funding went too.
Yes, I meant to say that. That was another one of the real successful events, and it was great to see all of you there. I really appreciated the city buying a table. The Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde donated an entire meal, and a chef who came from Sybaris in Albany, Chef Matt Bennett, and they put on the dinner. Fiji East was one of the sponsors, and for the whole festival, including the dinner, we were hoping to make enough money so that we each year can have a beneficiary. Last year it was the Locks. This year was We Love Clean Rivers, an organization that does a lot of pulling up of stuff from the bottom of the river, getting people on the river to experience its beauty and its wonder and learn about it. And in fact, the artwork at the entrance to Clackamas Park, I believe, is all by Ben Dye, was all made of dredged up things that were pulled up from the Willamette River. So that we don't have our final numbers, but I'm quite confident we're going to be able to give them a nice, healthy donation.
Good.
So we think that's another nice aspect of this is that we can support another organization that shares the same mission that we believe in.
Yes.
I think the material was pulled out of the Clackamas River.
Maybe.
Yeah, I think
Both,
so.
I think.
I think
I
so.
thought it was Willamette, but we won't quibble over that.
No, we won't. It got
Great to have that stuff out of the river.
Just came out of the river. We're good with that.
Yes.
Well, thank you, and thank all the people that worked on that. It was great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. With that, I don't see any more comments in terms of citizen comments. I'm sure we will see some, though, as we go into our formal agenda here. And we're going to start our general business with the adoption of the agenda. Is there anything anybody wants to pull from the consent agenda? Hearing none, we'll proceed on. General business. Ordinance for introduction, 13-1014, amending Title 13 of the Oregon City Municipal Code by adding a chapter relating to the utility facilities and public right-of-way, deleting Chapter 1212, and amending Chapter 1204, streets, sidewalks, and public places, and Chapter 13.24, telecommunications facilities. I'll go, I presume, directly to the city manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So our city recorder, Nancy Ide, has been shepherding this project over some time and actually negotiating franchises on behalf of the city, I think, since she began working for us off and on. And our right-of-way attorney is also here from Barry Elsner. That's Nancy Warner. And so Nancy and Nancy are going to make the staff report.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. This evening you have before you a consideration of a new chapter and other amendments to the municipal code related to utility facilities in the public right-of-way. The development of this ordinance will help fulfill one of the Commission's biennial goals, which was to develop and adopt a master utility right-of-way ordinance. It was the Commission's desire to more effectively manage the city's rights-of-ways and reduce the costs that are associated with individual franchise negotiations, thus being better stewards of the public trust in many ways. Because of the impact to our current franchisees, staff notified the city's partners in advance of this meeting and sent them the draft ordinance inviting their comments. Many of these partners are with us this evening, and we're glad you're here. Many have already submitted comments, and which you have before you. City staff considered the comments and revised the draft accordingly. This revised draft is on your monitors this evening as revised draft ordinance, and hard copies are also in the rear of the chambers for the public to review. As the city manager mentioned, we have with us this evening Nancy Werner, our franchise attorney, who actually developed the model right-of-way ordinance for the League of Oregon Cities. And since that time, several cities in the state have adopted a version of the ordinance, and Nancy is here to explain the benefits and effects of adopting such an ordinance. So at this point, I'd like to turn the presentation over to Nancy Werner.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. We've discussed this in the past in a work session and other circumstances, so I just want to highlight again for you what the right-of-way ordinance would do. As Nancy Ide said, what the city currently does is negotiate franchise agreements with each utility that wants to install facilities in the right-of-way. So we're not talking about garbage or other uses of the right-of-way. We're talking about utility facilities that are below the streets or on poles in the right-of-way. There are some limitations with that, one of which is the cost associated with individual negotiations, which is, I'm putting myself out of a job here tonight, but that's okay. This is a more effective way to manage the right-of-way. In addition to significantly reducing the cost of individual negotiations, you also just have a more consistent set of rules that all utilities would be following, so that you don't have to look at 10 different franchise agreements, maybe more, to figure out what the requirements are for an individual operator. The idea is when the existing franchises expire, as they expire, that utility will move to the right-of-way model, which is a license. That license is a simple document that says, we're installing this type of facilities in the city. We agree that we will abide by the terms of the right-of-way ordinance, which would be in the code. You don't negotiate unless there is a specific reason to do so. So the right-of-way ordinance allows for that. One example would be cable. Under federal law, cable operators are required to have a franchise agreement, and there's also some special cable-related issues such as PEG, the Public Education Government Access Channel, that needs to be separately negotiated. But any other utility, if there was something that the right-of-way ordinance does not address or does not address adequately for that particular utility, then that could be separately negotiated in a franchise agreement. So that nobody, the idea isn't to stick people with something that doesn't work, it's to keep things as uniform as possible, understanding that in some cases there may need to be an exception, which could be done through a franchise agreement. So what the ordinance has in it and what the license would incorporate is the terms that we currently see in a franchise agreement. So the biggest issues are how and when the right-of-way can be used, getting permits prior to construction, following those permits, how you must restore the street after you've dug in the street, traffic control, safety, things like that. In addition to that, and what a complement to that, I guess, would be insurance indemnification requirements. So if something does go wrong in that construction or with the facilities, the city is protected from the risks associated with that. And there's also a right-of-way usage fee. Now this ordinance, the right-of-way ordinance, establishes the fee, but the rate of the fee would be set by a separate resolution, which is not on the agenda for the evening. So tonight we're just looking at the ordinance itself, and the fees, the rate of the fees that each utility would pay will be the subject of another meeting. So right now we're just talking about the ordinance itself.
Could I just pose a question? We do have a draft of the resolution, but that's not what we're acting on today.
Absolutely, that is not what we're acting on. It is a draft. I've already discussed with staff that we have changes that need to be made to it. So that draft is not. I can tell you now that is not the final draft. Okay. It's something. Some utilities requested it to just get a sense of what the fees might be. So we provided that, but it really is going to change. We know it's going to change in terms of the definition of gross revenues and some other things that need to be clarified. So that is not on your agenda tonight. What we're talking about only is the ordinance itself, which again allows the commission to set the right-of-way usage fee by a separate resolution, which would be done if the right-of-way ordinance moves forward at a subsequent meeting. So I've kind of already touched on this. I'll just say briefly again, the benefits of this ordinance are you're not doing individual negotiations of franchises unless you really think it's necessary. And then again, it would be a limited negotiation most likely. You use everything in the code that you can, and then what doesn't work would be separately negotiated. From, I think, the Public Works standpoint, and we worked a lot with Public Works on this and making sure it reflects what their practice is or what they want the practice to be. It really streamlines the process of understanding what utilities are supposed to be doing in the right-of-way. So there's not quite so many questions on what rule applies to which utility. Once the franchise agreements have expired, everyone will be following the same rules. And I guess that's the final point I would make is you will still have, this won't change any existing franchise agreements. Some of the agreements require the operator to follow generally applicable portions of the code, in which case they may be using, may be subject to some of the requirements, the construction requirements, but it doesn't alter the terms of any franchise. It can't contradict the terms of any franchise. So those will all stay in place. It would be as they expire, you would move to the license system. Are there any questions?
Any questions from the commission at this point?
We've discussed this a lot, so.
Over a long period of time, yes.
Yeah.
There, I'm sure, is discussions because we have people that have signed up for this. I'll call you forward. We're going to limit the time to 3 minutes. And I'm calling you up by twos, and in the order in which I call the names is the order in which you'll speak. Karen Stewart and Sanford Inouye. Did I pronounce your name correctly?
Yes.
Okay.
Good evening. My name is Karen Stewart, and I'm the Local Government Affairs Director for CenturyLink. I reside in Lake Oswego, Oregon, but I visit Oregon City frequently. I wanted to start first with just a few comments about CenturyLink, because we do care and do invest heavily in our facilities here in Oregon City and continue to do so. So I'd like to give you a few examples. In 2012, we updated 30 of our neighborhood nodes to provide faster, higher speed bandwidth, including bringing fiber to those neighborhood nodes. In 2013 already, we've laid 5 miles of fiber. That fiber is to support not only our customers, retail customers, but some of our customers, such as our wireless carriers. So you can have improved wireless service. They'll go from the towers right to our fiber and be able to have increased bandwidth and availability of wireless. In addition, we have installed one of our actual first in the region fiber to an actual detached home dwelling housing development, the Merriweather development. We've actually brought fiber right to that development, and we're prepared to provide fiber to the home, to the new homes as they're built in that development. And that's quite a significant change in our prior network structure. We appreciate the opportunity to be able to speak today. I feel like I have to start with commending your staff member, Nancy Ide, as when this ordinance proposal change came out to us, dated September 30th, so we haven't had a lot of time to look at it. But she has been tireless in responding quickly to any inquiries, and that has made a big difference. So I have to commend you for your staff's work. We would also commend the staff for adopting some of the changes that CenturyLink has proposed, and we think that's going to really improve the use of the ordinance. However, there still are many key issues that we believe could benefit from increased conversation, and particularly among the different utilities. So we are recommending that you defer voting in the ordinance today, and that instead you defer it to a future meeting, and we have an opportunity to have a utility-led meeting to discuss some of our issues. And I know we're deferring the fee schedule to a different discussion, but we do have concerns in how that draft is looking between the ordinance and the fee schedule. As a incumbent local exchange carrier in the state of Oregon, we believe that the current draft is inconsistent with state law, and I'm sure that more details can come up when that is reviewed. We also are concerned that the rate for per linear foot does not appear to be based on the cost of the city to managing the right-of-way, so again, another issue that we're concerned about. So in summary, I would ask that you defer voting in the ordinance today, and again, give another opportunity for the industry to meet.
Thank you.
And at the risk of getting the hook here, because I'm a second issue, CenturyLink is also available at any time to work with the city as it relates to disaster preparedness. And we'd be available at any time if you'd like to include us in any of your disaster preparedness plans. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank
you, Mr. Mayor, City Commissioner Sanford Inouye with Comcast. And I'd like to echo Karen Stewart's commendation to Nancy I, who's been working this project for a while, and she's a great person to work with. I've been working with Nancy for years now. The item on the agenda, and again I echo Karen's comment about requesting time to have a meeting with staff to discuss some of the issues that we all raised in our comments related to the proposed ordinance, so that it could be hashed out in a staff situation before coming back to council. And we had submitted our written comments regarding the proposed ordinance, and we received the responses from city staff, and we appreciate those responses. We are currently still reviewing those responses to our concerns. If I could just highlight just one particular item that is a concern for us with respect to the proposed ordinance, and that's related to the internet service that we provide, as well as other providers in the community. And I'm just curious to whether or not that ordinance will apply to internet services that we provide to our customers, because internet services are not being taxed or imposed a fee upon anywhere that I know of. So I'm just curious to find out whether or not the proposed ordinance is intended to cover the revenues that companies like Comcast receive from our customers for internet service.
We'll have that clarified then after we have the other.
And also, if I could offer our same assistance with emergency preparedness, and to offer our assistance if necessary at any time, do not hesitate to contact me, and we can have our folks arrange to discuss with staff as far as what your needs are as far as emergency preparedness as well.
Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity for presenting our comments. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
And thank you for sacrificing some of your time so that CenturyLink could go over the 3-minute period. John Nicholson and Greg Diamond.
Mayor Neely, Commission, staff, thanks for having us here. I'm John Nicholson, Vice President and General Manager for TW Telecom, and we're a competitive local telephone company. I reside in Portland in Washington County. So we're here today, and my main concern is from a business perspective. And when we take a look at the potential fee structure, even though that's not being addressed tonight, we want you to be very well aware of the impact that it could have on us. When we look at the fee per foot of facilities, we believe that that could be very onerous to the business that we're currently providing to businesses in the city of Oregon City and a future business that we're doing here, maybe even to the point to where we'd have to consider abandoning facilities here within the city. And we are a current franchise holder, and we are providing service currently to businesses here. But with the fees that currently exist, that we're currently paying under our franchise, they're easier for us to administer on a per customer basis and to be able to determine those. When we go to a per foot fee per foot of facilities, it becomes very difficult, and we would actually be paying more in fees by far than we would be collecting in revenue from any customers that were here at this point in time, or potentially for the foreseeable future. So from our standpoint, it's more of a business concern. We want to invest in Oregon City. We believe in what you folks are doing here. As a franchise holder, we want to continue to invest in this network, and we have other customers that we're working with at this point in time. So I just ask for your consideration of that as you move forward, and thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Greg Diamond. I'm a regulatory vice president for TW Telecom. I live and work on Bainbridge Island, Washington, and I really enjoy coming down to Oregon. As I was crossing 205 this evening, a beautiful view of Mount Hood came down, and it was really stunning. And I called my wife immediately and shared that with her. It's just beautiful. I also want to commend both the city recorder Nancy Ide and the city's franchise attorney Nancy Warner. I actually didn't see this until October 8th. Not the city's fault. One of our executives went on vacation and somebody forgot to open her mail. So I didn't see it until October 8th, and I'm scrambling to get comments to the city recorder and to Ms. Warner. And I really do appreciate, we didn't actually serve our comments until Monday, and they provided us with written responses and made several changes to the several provisions that we were really pleased with. The one issue that I covered in our letter to the city was that there was legislation that was considered in the legislature last year, which I've learned today actually will in fact come up again. And in fact, Senator Burdick met with members of the cable community as well as the incumbent local exchange carrier community this week. And a bill will be circulated, delivered to the League of Oregon cities in the very near future that will address some of the concerns of the city last year. And specifically, the bill is expected to say that while it will have a cap on the percentage of gross revenue that cities can recover, it will allow the city to recover a percentage fee on revenue earned for the provision of IP voice services, which has been a continuing objection from Comcast and the other cable providers. And so that legislation will in fact, my understanding is it will in fact probably move ahead. And so if you adopt the ordinance in its current form now, and then January, February, there's law that's adopted that is uniform across the state, you may very well have to revisit your ordinance sometime next year. And so it might be more prudent and more efficient for you to wait until that legislation is considered and perhaps passed before this proceeds. And certainly, so the league has an opportunity to look at it. I know Ms. Warner represents the league as well, and I think that would make it a lot easier for you to have an ordinance that really is consistent with state law. Because even today, the Section 13.34130 provides that the city can determine the amount of the utility fee. Well, if there's a cap adopted by the legislature and signed by the governor, you wouldn't be able to determine any fee you wanted. It would have to be subject to that cap. And so as currently drafted, this would be inconsistent with state law. And so that would be my only
possible future state.
Well, that's right.
You are talking about the government, right?
You're right, exactly. And I understand that you may. So I'm just providing you with an opportunity to perhaps handle this more efficiently and effectively once you see if there's new law. And I want to just a personal shout out to my father who lives. I think he lives 2 blocks from you, Nancy, in Wilmette, Illinois. He lives at 16th and Elmwood. Are you Central?
I'm at 6th.
6th and okay, so not too close, but they're in the same. I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago, and it was really great to catch up with a fellow nearby Chicago, and it was easier. So thank you very much for your time, and I really enjoyed coming down and meeting you. Thanks a lot.
Now, in the order, John Ludlow and Shauna Brownstein. Brownstein or Brownstein?
No, there's a schism in my family.
Which do you prefer?
Stein.
Okay, Brownstein. And John Ludlow first.
Got to get my old guy glasses on first here. Mayor Neely and members of the City Commission, my name is John Ludlow. I'm the chairman of the Clackamas County Board of Commissioners. Now, I'm here representing my commission colleagues to articulate our concerns about proposed ordinance 13.34. county recognizes and respects the city's ability to regulate areas and uses within its right-of-ways. The proposed ordinance, as amended, specifically applies to activities by the county and other public entities working within the county's or the city's right-of-way. Potentially the county, any of its special districts, such as Tri-City Service District, and other public entities would be subject to licensing and registration requirements under the new ordinance. We respectfully ask that any fees imposed by the city on another public entity's services have the objective of recovering your actual costs incurred in mapping and inventorying the infrastructure, as opposed to just generating operating revenue. The proposed resolution that accompanies this ordinance, and I realize that it's a draft, but what a draft it is, would assess fees against the county on 6% of gross revenue or on a lineal foot basis, whichever is greater. WES, Water Environmental Services, Tri-City, and CCSD1 has approximately 27,000 feet of pipe in Oregon City. The city's proposed lineal foot charge would equate to $15,000 annual payment. Tri-City has gross revenue of $6.5 million. The city's 6% could equate to over $100,000 yearly, and I assure you that would be passed on to your users here. And I read some in the paper here recently where there was quite a remonstrance by this group about sewer prices. I guarantee you, should you impose that, they will go up.
We're scheduled to go up anyway.
We urge you to reconsider the potential impact these fees would impose on the county, its district, and its customers, probably of which 10,000 are Oregon City residents, households, that is. Realistically, any city-imposed fees on sewer and stormwater services, let alone our lighting districts, will result in a direct pass-through to the consuming public and users of these services. In Tri-City's case, many of those users would be, again, residents of Oregon City. We urge you to consider, in setting these fees, the role the county and special districts have in providing these vital services that are so important to the public's health, safety, and welfare. I want to thank you for your consideration tonight. We value our relationship with Oregon City, I should say our renewed relationship, and look forward to strengthening these ties going forward. I will mention that with me tonight is our new County Administrator, Donald Krupp, and we've pummeled him for 5 weeks, and I'm sure you can finish him off. But,
we'll be happy
so
to finish you off.
That's why I not put him up here.
I didn't allow him. I saved his life.
Come on up.
Don't do it. But anyway, I do appreciate the time for you, and I would say that we have profitable lunches. Myself now and Donald Krupp, and the mayor and the city manager, and you know, David Fraser's right cross is not nearly as bad as some people think. But anyway,
but profitable does not mean
profitable
we're making money on lunches.
I think we take turns on the call. I think I bought last time.
That's right.
So thank you very much.
Thank you.
You covered the time before, didn't you?
Yeah. Okay. I'm keeping track.
Thank you.
My name is Shauna Brownstein. I live in Portland, and I want to thank you all, Mayor and Commissioners, for this opportunity to address you. I represent Northwest Natural. We are a 150-plus-year-old company based in Portland, and we serve the region with natural gas. I just want to make a couple of high-level comments. I'm fairly new to this franchise agreement world. But the first thing I want to say is just to echo what my colleagues have said. Nancy Ides is great. I get emails from her at like 6:30 in the morning, at 10 o'clock at night, always responding, setting up meetings. She has been fantastic, and we very much appreciate her bringing this draft ordinance to our attention. And we had actually been in the process of negotiating a renewed franchise agreement. Our franchise agreement expired in 2010. And there were some personnel changes, things fell through the cracks, and then this came to our attention. And so we'd be very interested in pursuing the franchise agreement that we had put a lot of time into, but we certainly have some comments about right-of-way ordinance as well. We have not had much time to review it, to do a formal legal review, so my comments are going to be, like I said, fairly high level. So the first thing I would say, to echo you, is to just consider the rate impact to customers, and particularly as it impacts economic development. Energy prices, particularly the kinds of companies that you're looking to attract to the Blue Heron site and things like that, are really sensitive to energy prices. And so anything that's going to increase that is going to really catch the eye of companies that are looking to locate here. And it's just something that we're very sensitive to, and I know that our industrial customers and our commercial customers are very sensitive to as well. We hear from them a lot. And I think that another thing that occurs to us is that there's going to be a lot of negotiating with each utility despite the consistency of rules. Each utility, speaking for ourselves, we're very different. We're not like an electric utility. We're not like a telecom. Yes, we put things in the right of way, but we're making long-term big investments. And so some of the requirements are fairly onerous, like an annual review and a 100% bond and things like that. Don't necessarily make sense to us given our history here and the way we operate as a company. We also are very regulated by the state, by the feds, by the PUC, and there are a lot of conflicts within the ordinance that we were not permitted to do by federal law. For instance, having city officials cut a line in an event of emergency. To echo my colleagues as well, we would love to work with you on disaster preparedness, but we can't have city officials, workers cutting our facilities. It's a safety issue, and we're regulated by the feds on that. So I'll just conclude my comments. I really appreciate your time, and we are more than happy to work with you on this process.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. We're going to go back to our attorney, Nancy Werner. A lot of the comments did seem to be fee-driven at this point, not all of them. I have to make a comment, though, to Chair Ludlow. You own a great deal of property in the city of Oregon City on which you pay no taxes for the services that the city provides. So I'm a little bit less sympathetic to the arguments you shouldn't be paying fees on the right-of-way, and I'm just letting you know right up front. And with that,
and with that, moving on. It's a good thing that you guys have a good relationship.
I'll probably end up buying lunch next time.
Well, thank you, Mayor. As you said, most of the comments were related to fees, and so that's not really what's in front of us today. But I do want to make some general comments that actually also apply to the fees. A couple of people made a comment about the fees either not being permissible under the law as it currently stands or the possibility that the law would change. I just wanted to point out that the right-of-way ordinance, specifically in the fee section, the ordinance, not in the fee resolution that will come later, but in the ordinance establishing the fee, it says the fee is subject to any limitations in state or federal law. It's built in there. We know we can't impose a fee that goes beyond what we're permitted to do under, if we're preempted under law, then we're preempted. And that is built into the ordinance using language that has worked in other cities where they had a fee that, potentially that exceeded what state law allows for some providers, but not for others, because there are some interesting treatments under state law of some providers one way and a similar provider a different way. And so we're trying to work with that, and you almost need to have that kind of general language to, to address the fact that there are some preemptions that we don't control, obviously, and we just have to live with. So that is covered. And then to the comment about utilities being different and will this really work, and there's different regulations, there's also that similar language in general. This whole ordinance is subject to applicable law. And the utilities have to comply with applicable law, so does the city, and how this is implemented and how utilities are treated. So in no way does this authorize the city to do anything that you're not permitted to do by law, or that you're preempted from doing by law. So it's all built in there. And in my experience, this is very similar to the way it is handled in a franchise agreement as well. You don't usually list out every single law that may possibly apply to a particular utility. you typically say you're going to comply with all applicable laws. And you might name, the National Electric Safety Code or things like that, but you don't typically spell out every law. So I don't think this is different than what would end up in a franchise agreement. And that language also allows for the fact that there may be a different law that affects one provider versus another. So I think that issue is covered. There was, again, I don't want to get too much into the fees, but actually I won't address the fees right now. There are some statements made about the fees that I do not think reflect the state of the law. The law doesn't require them to be cost-based and things like that, but we can address that when we get to the point of the fee resolution. Because again, this ordinance does not set the fee, it just enables the commission to set the fee at a later date. I also wanted to point out that the city utilities, the city water and sewer systems pay a franchise fee of 6%. So this is not doing anything inconsistent with what the city is already doing. So it is not, the idea is to try to make a more level playing field, not to start picking out certain entities and dragging them into this. It's really to, let's look at everybody who has a similar use of the right-of-way, and to the extent we can under law, let's treat them all the same way. So I just wanted to make sure that's clear that this, the city utilities are included in the definition of this ordinance. The city utilities have to do everything that we're asking everybody else to do. So, we're trying to strike that balance of managing the right-of-way efficiently and properly, but also fairly. And I think by having these city utilities included, it's a little bit of a check on that. You're not going to make your city utilities do something that you think is unlawful or unreasonable, and we're not asking anybody else to do that either. We're asking everyone to do the same thing, including the city. So I think those are the main points I want to make. If there's any other questions anybody has.
Would you address Mr. Inouye's comments regarding the internet?
The definition of communication services in the right-of-way ordinance is very similar to what's in the existing telecommunications ordinance in the code. At 1324, I believe, which will still be in effect for now because we have a lot of telecommunications franchises that incorporate the terms of that. So the right-of-way ordinance doesn't really change anything on the telecom side. It applies it's the same definition as what's currently there. So this isn't a huge difference in terms of what the definition means.
And of course, we have current franchise agreements with many utilities. Some will come up. These come into play when, in fact, the franchise fees are renegotiated?
When the franchise expires, yes. When the franchise expires, then they would come to the city and get the license under the right-of-way ordinance. Or again, there is an option to negotiate a franchise, but the intention would be they would get a license instead.
And of course, one of the city's interests is that we spend a great deal of time negotiating each of the right-of-way agreements that comes before us, and this is an attempt to create a level playing field that'll make it easier to work with the various utilities that do supply those services.
Yes, I think that's definitely the case, that neither side has to spend the time and money negotiating, and the rules are very clear. They would be in the code. Everyone can see them. Any utility, any company that's considering coming into the city can see them and know what the requirements are. They can know they're not going to spend months and months and months, or years in some cases, negotiating an agreement to come into the city and provide the services they want to provide.
Any other questions or comments?
Well, I just have to make a couple comments.
Go ahead.
I think that this gets us going down the right path. And this has been discussed. It's been on our agenda many, many times. And I just have to commend staff for sending you guys the agreement that we're looking at tonight, the ordinance that we're looking at tonight, giving you the opportunity to come here and give your opinions. I think we have tried to address a lot of these comments. I know that fees are always a big thing. Okay, I get that. I have to pay my Comcast bill. You have to pay yours, or CenturyLink or whatever. But I think that the fee structure is probably going to be where we're going to need a lot more input from our fellow patrons out there. But the ordinance is something that I think it's the right thing to do, and I would like to see more cities and the county maybe look at accepting an ordinance like this.
Any other comments, questions? And I would point out this is, of course, for a first reading. It would come back for a second reading should it pass this time around. And if something glaring comes up in that period of time, we can take a look at it again. That is, anyone want to put forward a motion?
Well, I'll attempt it, but Nancy, you can help me out. So I move to
First reading.
I move for the first reading of ordinance number 13-1014, amending Title 13 of Oregon City Municipal Code by adding Chapter 13.34 relating to the utility facilities in the public right-of-way, deleting Chapter 12.12 utility wire poles, and amending 12.04 streets, sidewalks, public places, and Chapter 13.24 telecom facilities.
Here's a second.
Just 1 second, Mr. Mayor. I'm sorry. I just want to clarify that Commissioner Mum's motion means the amended ordinance that was put on.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Thank you. See, that's why I look to you.
That's in the red line form here.
Second.
Does that leave anything for our city attorney to read?
I should read it. What I want to do is check and make sure some of these amendments, whether that requires a reading of those sections in our based on our charter, and any of the readings may be by title only if no commission member present at the meeting requests to have the ordinance read in full, or if a copy of the ordinance is provided for each commission member in 3 copies. Any ordinance enacted after being read by title alone may have no legal effect if it differs substantially from its terms. It was thus filed. So let me. I believe we do have to read the sections that do have changes.
So this is not going to be difficult because our
Go,
city
Bill, go.
attorney is one of the fastest readers I have ever encountered.
So with that, let me read the title of the ordinance is Ordinance Number 13-1014, an ordinance of the City of Oregon City amending Title 13 of the Oregon City Municipal Code, Public Services, by adding a new Chapter 1334 relating to utility facilities and public right-of-way, deleting Chapter 12.12 utility wires and poles, and amending Chapter 1204 streets, sidewalks, and public places, and Chapter 13.24 telecommunications facilities.
I didn't have to read it.
No, that's why I was wondering if you had anything else to read.
Yeah, and this is where we get into the changes, and Section 13.34050 definitions, and the definition of communication services changed. And it now reads, communication services means any service provided for the purpose of transmission of information, including but not limited to voice, video, or data, without regard to the transmission protocol employed, whether or not the transmission medium is owned by the provider itself. Communication services include all forms of telephone service and voice, video, and data or information transport. It does not include cable services, open video system services defined in 47 CFR 76, private communication systems services provided without using the public right-of-way. 4, public communication systems. 5, over-the-air radio or television broadcasting to the public at large from facilities licensed by the Federal Communications Commission or a successor thereto. And 6, direct-to-home satellite service within the meaning of Section 602 of the Telecommunications Act. Also, the definition of private communication system is changed to read, private communication system means a system including the construction, maintenance, or operation of the system for the provision of a service or any portion of a service which is owned or operated exclusively by a person for their use and not for sale or resale, including trade, barter, or other exchange of value directly or indirectly. And a new definition has been added, public communication service. Public communication service means any system owned or operated by a government entity or entities for their exclusive use for internal communication or communication with other governmental entities, and includes services provided by the State of Oregon pursuant to ORS 190.240 and 283.140. Public communication system does not include any system used for sale or resale, including trade, barter, or other exchange of value or communication services or capacity on the system directly or indirectly to any person. With that, there's a fair bit. But then 13.34070M1 has some changes, and this involves termination of a license. It now provides M, termination. 1, revocation or termination of a license. The City Commission may terminate or revoke the license granted pursuant to this chapter for any of the following reasons. A, material violation of any provisions of this chapter. B, material violations of any provision of this license. C, material misrepresentation in a license application. D, failure to pay related taxes, compensation, fees, or costs due to the city after final determination of the taxes, compensations, fees, or costs. E, failure to restore the right-of-ways after construction is required by this chapter or other applicable state or local laws, ordinance, rules, and regulations. F, failure to comply with technical safety and engineering standards related to work in the right-of-way. Or G, failure to obtain or maintain any and all license, permits, certifications, or other authorizations required by state or federal law for the placement, maintenance, and or operation of the utility facilities. Then 13.34880B3C is amended to provide as follows. Location and route of all utility facilities on or in the right-of-ways to be located under the surface of the ground, including the line and grade proposed for the burial at all points along the right-of-way or within the right-of-way. Applicants' existing utility facilities shall be differentiated on the plans from new construction. Public Works Director may require additional information necessary to demonstrate the proposed location can accommodate the utility facilities. And then 13.34080B4 is amended to read, all permit applications shall be accompanied by the verification of a professional engineer or other qualified and duly authorized representative of the applicant that the drawings, plans, and specifications submitted with the application comply with all applicable technical codes, rules, and regulations. Then 13.34080B10 is amended to read, all work which does not comply with the permit, the approved or corrected plans and specifications of work, or the requirements of this chapter shall be removed at the sole expense of the permittee. The city is authorized to stop work in order to assure compliance with provisions of this chapter. If the permittee fails to remove work as required in the subsection, the city may remove the work at the expense of the permittee after notice and opportunity to cure. Then 13.34080D3 is amended to read, if the utility operator fails to restore rights of way or property as required in this chapter, the city shall give the utility operator written notice and provide the utility operator a reasonable period of time, not less than 10 days, unless an emergency or threat to public safety is deemed to exist, not exceeding 30 days, or such additional time agreed to in writing by the city to restore the right of way or property. If after said notice the utility operator fails to restore the right of way or property as required in this chapter, the city shall cause such restoration to be made at the expense of the operator. Change to 13.34090D sub B involving removal of unauthorized facilities is amended to read, utility system or facility is unauthorized under any of the following circumstances. B, the facility has been abandoned and the city has not provided written authorization for abandonment in place. A facility is abandoned if it is not used and is not planned for further use. A facility will be presumed abandoned if it is not used for a period of 12 consecutive months. Utility operator may overcome this presumption by presenting plans for future use of the facility. 13.34090E is amended. E1 is amended. This involves removal by the city. It says the city retains the right and privilege to cut or move the facilities of any utility operator or similar entity located within the rights of the city without notice as the city may determine to be necessary, appropriate, or useful in response to a public health or safety emergency. The city will use qualified personnel or contractors consistent with applicable state and federal safety laws and regulations to the extent reasonably practicable without impeding the city's response to the emergency. The city will use best efforts to provide the utility operator with notice prior to cutting or moving facilities. If prior notice is not possible, the city will provide such notice as soon as reasonably practical after taking such action. Subsection 2 is amended to read, if the utility operator fails to remove any facility when required to do so under this chapter, the city may, upon at least 10 days prior written notice, remove the facility using qualified personnel or contractors consistent with applicable state and federal laws and regulations and industry standards. The utility operator shall be responsible for paying the full cost of the removal and any administrative costs incurred by the city in removing the facility and obtaining reimbursement. Upon receipt of a detailed invoice from the city, the utility operator shall reimburse the city for the costs the city incurred within 30 days. The obligation to remove shall survive the termination of the license or franchise. Then 13.34090 subsection F is amended to read, engineering record drawings. The utility operator shall provide the city with 2 complete sets of record drawings in a form acceptable to the city upon completion of construction. 13.34110B involving maintenance is amended to read, if after written notice from the city of the need to repair or maintenance to address a significant risk to life or property, utility operator fails to repair and maintain facilities as requested by the city and by the date reasonably established by the city may perform such repair and maintenance using qualified personnel or contractors at the utilities operator's sole expense. Upon receipt of a detailed invoice from the city, the utility operator shall reimburse the city for the costs of the city incurred within 30 days. And one final one, 1334-150, subsection C, involving indemnification. Each utility operator shall defend, indemnify, and hold the city and its officers, employees, agents, and representatives harmless from and against any and all liability, causes of action, claims, damages, loss, judgments, and other costs and expenses, including attorney's fees and costs of suits or defense at both the trial and appeal level, whether or not a trial or appeal ever takes place, that may be asserted by any person or entity in any way arising out of or resulting from, during, or in connection with, or alleged to arise out of or result from the negligent, careless, or wrongful acts, omissions, failures to act, or other misconduct of the utility operator or its affiliates, officers, employees, agents, contractors, subcontractors, or lessees in the construction, operation, maintenance, repair, removal of its facilities, and in providing or offering utility service over the facilities, whether such acts or omissions are authorized, allowed, or prohibited by this chapter by a franchise agreement, unless the utility operator's failure arises directly from the city's negligence or willful misconduct. The acceptance of a license under Section 13.34070 shall constitute such an agreement by the applicant, whether the same is expressed or not. Upon notification of any such claim, the city shall notify the utility operator and provide the utility operator with the opportunity to provide defense regarding any such claim. And those are the changes. So.
Thank you.
Take a drink of water.
Besides his attorney capabilities, and two things impressed me over time. One was that reading ability. The other was a beautiful mustache, which his wife made him cut off. Anyway, thank
Next
you very
Halloween.
much.
But we have to vote.
Yeah, and we have to vote now. Roll call.
Okay. Commissioner Smith?
Aye.
Commissioner Roth?
Aye.
Commissioner Mum?
Aye.
Commissioner Pauley?
Aye.
Mayor Neely?
Aye. Passes unanimously.
Yep.
With that, we're going to go into another ordinance for introduction, 13-115, an ordinance of the City of Oregon City granting non-exclusive franchise to Comcast of Oregon 2, Inc. to construct, operate, and maintain a cable system within the City of Oregon City. And again,
I think that issue was addressed.
I think we will be able to probably move to our city recorder and then to our attorney.
Yes.
Right away, attorney.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. This evening, you have before you consideration of a new franchise agreement with Comcast of Oregon 2, Incorporated, to construct, operate, and maintain a cable system within the City of Oregon City. In 1997, the city granted a cable franchise to AT&T Comcast Corporation, which is now Comcast of Oregon 2, Incorporated, for a 12-year term that expired in May of 2009. Since that time, the city has granted Comcast 8 extensions of the agreement while negotiations continued toward a new agreement. The last extension expired on June 30th of 2013, and at that time, the city developed a final draft of the agreement, which included many mutually agreed upon terms. From the city's perspective, however, there are two substantive unresolved issues. One, the PEG capital fee amount, which is a contribution to the capital costs associated with public education and government programming. And two, the definition of gross revenue. Our franchise attorney, Nancy Werner, is here with us this evening to explain the ordinance that's before you and to answer your questions. So at this time, I'm turning the presentation over to Nancy.
Thank you. And hello again, Mayor and Commissioners. This is another ordinance that we've had some discussions about. So just as a quick overview, as Nancy Ide said, this is a cable franchise agreement that is required under federal law. Every cable operator must have a franchise in order to operate a cable system, provide cable service at the local level. What you have before you is what the city has put together based on the direction from the commission on the two major issues that Nancy mentioned, which is the PEG fee to support capital costs of PEG programming, and the other issue of the definition of gross revenues on which franchise fees are paid. This was submitted to Comcast, and Comcast provided a revised document that it does not meet the commission's direction on either of those two issues. So These agreements are for your consideration this evening. If you choose to grant a franchise agreement this evening, Comcast, well, after the second reading, the franchise would be given to Comcast, who would then have 60 days to accept the franchise or reject the franchise. And at that point, if it is not accepted after 60 days, I think probably the next step would be to move to the formal renewal process under the Cable Act, which is a specific set of requirements and timing for getting a renewal done. And as Nancy said, this has been going on for quite some time. So I think if a franchise is granted this evening and is not accepted, I think that's probably the route we're going to need to take in order to get this franchise done, in the foreseeable future. And I can go into any detail you like about the franchise agreement, but I guess I think it might be more efficient to just ask if you have any specific questions.
Well, this one too we've discussed.
I think probably the greatest benefit would probably to go ahead and take public testimony. And
Sure.
You comment on that. And Senator Inoue, we want to come forward one more time.
Yes. Thank you, Mayor Neely, City Commissioners. Good to see you again. And thank you again for the opportunity to present some comments on this agenda item. And I just wanted to point out, as mentioned earlier by City Attorney, that for cable franchises under the Cable Act, there is a requirement that a franchise be provided between the city and the cable operator in order to operate within the city. And so it's a kind of unique situation, different from what was discussed earlier with the other utilities, just because of the uniqueness with the Cable Act. I do want to discuss briefly regarding the franchise renewal, where this renewal period is the opportunity for both the city and the cable operator Comcast to revisit and review and update the franchise that's been in existence for years, executed more than 10 years ago, and to update it in order to meet not only the needs currently today, but also the needs for the future, for both the city and for Comcast. While we are in renewal as provided under the Cable Act, we are still comply with the current franchise. For example, we still remit our franchise fee payments. We abide by the franchise provisions for work within the rights of way, etc., until a new franchise is mutually agreed upon by the parties. At that time, the new franchise take effect, depending on what's been mutually agreed upon by the parties. Tonight, it's pretty unusual and pretty much highly impossible for a franchise to be adopted by a city where there's not been a mutual agreement by both parties. And honestly, we're kind of befuddled as to the recommendation by staff to adopt a franchise when it's not been mutually agreed upon by both sides yet. Here again, I would respectfully request that the Commission remove the item from the agenda so that the parties will have some time to complete negotiations in order to reach a franchise, cable franchise, that's mutually acceptable by both the city and the company. There, as mentioned earlier, there's not many issues remaining to be resolved. The big issue, as mentioned earlier by City Attorney, is the PEG fee. And our customers really do have a choice in cable service providers. So we need to be competitive with our competitors who are not regulated by the city. They are not regulated by the city by way of having to have a franchise, having to pay a franchise fee, having to provide PEG channels, and also having to pay or remit a PEG fee. So our competitors are the satellite cable providers, programmers of video programming that's on the internet, and also the traditional over-the-air broadcast networks. PEG fee is specifically restricted to capital expenditures in support of access programming. So that means that those fees can be used to purchase
cameras as you have here today in City Hall, and not for operational support, meaning personnel. And I do want to point out also that under the current franchise that we're operating today, Comcast and its predecessor did make a contribution to the city for PEG capital support in the amount of $348,000. Our proposal that was sent to the city is more than 52% above that amount that we contributed previously to the city for specifically only PEG capital support. So again, I thank you for the opportunity to present our comments, and we hope that we'll be able to continue our negotiations to reach a mutual agreement soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The PEG, of course, is cable provides the access to the public media, and none of the other providers do. I guess we can, on the internet, they can access our website and also get those. But the question I have is the 248,000. Was that right? The statement. 348,000. When was that paid? Do you know?
The prior franchise had several lump sum payments, the last of which was made in 2004. So the city has not received franchise fees in almost 10 years. I'm sorry, thank you.
PEG
fees.
PEG fees.
Bad slip, yeah. So, and the city has in that time, since 2004, spent money from the general fund on PEG capital. So you have spent over $218,000 on PEG capital in excess of what you received under the last franchise. And if I may, Mayor, I'd also just like to note that as Mr. Inouye said at the beginning of his comments, during the renewal, you're looking forward at what your needs are for this coming term. You don't look at what was provided in the last franchise in terms of PEG support. I mean, to say that there's the Comcast current offer on PEG support is a certain percentage of the old franchise really says nothing about what the city has in terms of future needs. And the city recorder has done a lot of work in putting together a list of needs, getting quotes from experts on what it will cost to get those needs fulfilled. So that includes cameras. That the city hall council chambers are very nice right now, but during the term of this franchise, this equipment's going to need to be replaced. We're also talking about equipment for other facilities so that you can have either live programming or at least taped programming from other facilities in the city where meetings happen and other events take place, and you'll be able to get those also onto the channel. And Willamette Falls Media Center has told the city that they're looking for more content. They can use more live programming, actually. So, there is demonstrated need for what the city is asking for. And in fact, this list of needs was provided to Comcast years ago when we first embarked on this negotiation. And recently, Comcast asked the city to, and by the city I mean staff. This has not come to the commission for a formal, adoption of your view of the needs, but asked the staff to cut some things out of the list to reduce what the PEG amount would be. And again, the city recorder did that and came up with, you looked at Comcast's revised list of what they thought was more appropriate for the city. I'll pause for a second and say again, it's the city's determination. But, we went through that exercise, and it still came out at a need for over the term of the franchise at about $800,000. And the PEG support that is in the draft, the staff version of the draft for your consideration tonight, comes out to $816,000 over the term of the franchise. So those numbers are very close, and the numbers that we were the $800,000 number again does not address all of the needs that the staff has identified, and it's an estimate of what we think the needs would be, even on Comcast's vastly reduced list. So I think even when you look at it from that perspective, what's in the city draft is more than reasonable. And certainly if we went back to the list of what the city is looking for, the dollar per month per subscriber that's in the draft, it doesn't even cover the actual list of needs. But looking around at what we thought would be a reasonable fee, that seemed to be a good place to land.
And that list I'll call it an itemized list, that was actually presented to Comcast.
Yes. Oh, yes. We've given them the list of, what items we were including in coming up with the PEG amount that we were asking for. Yes. And if I may, just a couple of things. I want to note that the Comcast franchise did expire without extension in June of this year. And I believe it's the case, I haven't checked, but I believe it's the case that Comcast is still paying franchise fees, or will when those come due. But I don't agree that the franchise goes on indefinitely during the renewal process. That can't be the case. The Cable Act is not established to allow renewal negotiations to go on endlessly. So there does have to be an end point. Hopefully it's with a mutual agreement. But I just wanted to address that point. And the other point about the process this evening, we notified Comcast back in August that the city's intention was, we provided the draft back in August and said the intention was to take it to the commission for a vote. So we received no objection to that process until tonight, and there's nothing in the Cable Act that says you can't do this. Comcast doesn't have to accept the agreement, but there's nothing in the Cable Act that prohibits you from saying, we feel like we've come as far as we can in this informal negotiation process. Here's our best and final. You can take it or leave it. And if they take it, fabulous. If they don't, then as I said, you probably would want to go into the formal process. And if that is what the commission would recommend, I would recommend you direct staff to do that in the event that Comcast does not accept this draft. I'm sorry, this proposal.
Any other comments? Mr. Pauly.
I'm concerned about the length of time that this franchise renewal process has taken and the city resources that it has entailed. It's been extended several times, and it expired in June of this year. So those are my concerns.
Commissioner Milne.
My comment would be, if I was to contact Comcast and say, I need an extension for years, Comcast would turn me off. They would not accept my, I need an extension. I think this will spark some interest from Comcast if we do pass this tonight, and maybe you'll get more action since we've had already a lot of extensions. Those are my comments.
I'll entertain a motion for first reading. Just the title.
Okay.
Okay. I move to approve 13585 ordinance for introduction number 13-1015, an ordinance of the City of Oregon City granting a non-exclusive franchise to Comcast of Oregon 2, Inc. to construct, operate, and maintain a cable system within the City of Oregon City.
And that's
Second.
And that's for first reading.
For first reading, excuse me.
Second.
Ordinance number 13-1015, an ordinance of the City of Oregon City granting a non-exclusive franchise to Comcast of Oregon 2, Inc. to construct, operate, and maintain a cable system within the City of Oregon City. And I presume that, if you remember, the staff report had two versions attached, and we're talking about the one with the staff recommended version.
Staff
Yes,
recommended.
correct.
Yes, correct. Thank you.
With that, roll call, please.
Okay. Commissioner Smith?
Aye.
Commissioner Roth?
Aye.
Commissioner Mum?
Aye.
Commissioner Pauly?
Aye.
Mayor Neely?
Aye. Motion passed unanimously. Coming back for second reading at the next meeting, is that right?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
May I also, we've discussed a little bit tonight about what the process would be if this franchise is not accepted by Comcast, and I would suggest if the commission has any direction to staff, if you would like the formal process to be implemented if this franchise is not accepted, I would suggest that you direct staff tonight. There will be a second reading, but then at least we'll know the course of action if that is what you would like to do.
This require a vote, or is just a simple direction sufficient?
We'd like to suggest a vote.
Yeah, vote would be useful.
Motion
Okay.
to implement the formal action if, in fact, it is not accepted within a 60-day period. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Smith?
Aye.
Commissioner Roth?
Aye.
Commissioner Mum?
Aye.
Commissioner Pauly?
Aye.
Mayor Neely?
Aye. And I presume this doesn't come into effect if the second reading doesn't go through.
we can revisit if the second reading
Right.
doesn't come through, and you can rescind or take some other action.
Very good. With that, thank you very much for input and discussion. With that, we will go on to an annexation ordinance.
Or we can wait till
Is Rocky requesting it?
Requesting what? A break?
Yeah, we can take 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rocky. Ordinance number 13-1010, an ordinance annexing .69 acres on Holcomb Boulevard to the City of Oregon City and approving the election results for annexation 12-01, which occurred last November. This proposal was approved by the citizens of Oregon City. And the next step will be to provide this ordinance to Metro and then on to the state for processing, which will add it to the property to the tax rolls. So tonight is just validating the election result. This property will remain future urban 10-acre zoning until such time as the Park Place concept plan and the zoning associated with that is completed. They also need to do some transportation analysis as part of that rezoning that would occur. The one request that we do have, we've submitted a revised ordinance number 13-10-10. The only change that we made was on page 2. We removed section 2, which was a reference to the previous findings that you made when you approved the annexation and sent it to the voters. You've already adopted those when you approved this. We removed it for clarity, and there was no reason to adopt what you've already adopted again. So that is the only change that we've made. We provided renumbered sections on the revised ordinance on your dais. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
It's just probably more of an academic question than anything else. What would happen if we didn't approve that ordinance that we sent it to the electorate to begin with and they voted it in?
We'd be in trouble.
I think so.
Yeah.
Wouldn't get elected.
I believe you're required to adopt it, and I'd have to dig in and do some research.
Well, please don't bother.
That's an interesting question.
I don't want to pay you more money.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of formality at this point.
Don't want to know that badly.
Okay.
Then do I hear a motion for the ordinance?
I move.
Second.
With that, and that is ordinance 13-1010.
For the first reading?
For the first
For the
reading.
Ordinance number 13-1010, an ordinance annexing certain property to the City of Oregon City and approving the election results for AN 1201. I'd also note that there is a change in the ordinance, but it's a deletion of a section, so there is no reading to be done.
Vote please.
Commissioner Smith?
Aye.
Commissioner Roth?
Aye.
Commissioner Mum?
Aye.
Commissioner Pauly?
Aye.
Mayor Neely?
Aye. Going into ordinance for introduction, another annexation.
Ordinance for introduction number 13-1011, an ordinance annexing .3 acres on Leroy Lane to the City of Oregon City and approving the election results for annexation 12-02. Once again, this was set forth to the voters on November 6, 2012. They approved ballot measure number 3-417. Once again, this will be sent to Metro and to the state for processing to add to the property to the tax rolls. And is with the previous ordinance, we did remove section 2. You have the revised ordinance number 13-1011 on your dais. Section 2 has been removed, which referenced the previous findings of fact that you adopted when you sent this to the voters.
Request for motion, please read the number.
Okay. Well, if I can get there, I will. So, this isn't a first reading or anything?
First reading.
First reading, yes.
Okay. First reading for ordinance number 13-1011.
Second.
With that, roll call.
Well-
First reading, excuse me.
Ordinance number 13-1011, ordinance annexing certain property to the City of Oregon City and approving the election results for AN 12-02. And as with the previous ordinance, there was a deletion of section 2.
Vote, please.
Commissioner Smith?
Aye.
Commissioner Roth?
Aye.
Commissioner Mum?
Aye.
Commissioner Polly?
Aye.
Mayor Neely?
Aye. Another request for an ordinance for annexation. Number, please, when you make a motion. I can't make it.
You need anything from me?
Well,
Is that
wait,
the
Yeah, I don't
13
think so.
numbers?
Yeah.
Sorry.
You'd be very efficient. Ordinance number 13-1012, an ordinance annexing 11.93 acres on Beaver Creek Road to the city of Oregon City and approving the election results for annexation AN 12-03, annexing approximately 12 acres of industrial land on Beaver Creek Road, affirming the approval of ballot measure number 3-418. Once again, you have a revised ordinance 13-1012, which removed section 2 referencing the previous findings of fact.
First reading.
Move to approve first reading of ordinance number 13-1012.
Second.
Ordinance number 13-1012, an ordinance annexing certain property to the city of Oregon City and approving the election results for AN 12-03. And as with the previous two ordinances, section 2 has been deleted.
Vote, please.
Commissioner Smith?
Aye.
Commissioner Roth?
Aye.
Commissioner Mum?
Aye.
Commissioner Polly?
Aye.
Mayor Neely?
Aye. And one more, or just for...
And last one, ordinance number 13-1013, an ordinance annexing .89 acres on Maple Lane Road to the city of Oregon City and approving the election results for annexation 12-04. Once again, confirming the vote of November 6, 2012, approving ballot measure number 3-419. And as with the previous ordinances, ordinance 13-1013 has removed section 2. The revised ordinance has been provided, and that removes the previous findings of fact that were adopted with the approval of this annexation.
Motion for first reading?
I'll move that we approve the first reading of 13-1013.
Second.
Ordinance number 13-1013, an ordinance annexing certain property to the city of Oregon City and approving the election results for AN 12-04. And again, section 2 of this ordinance has been deleted.
Vote, please.
Commissioner Smith?
Aye.
Commissioner Roth?
Aye.
Commissioner Mum?
Aye.
Commissioner Polly?
Aye.
Mayor Neely?
I'm just going to make a statement having these approved. There was I wasn't in favor of having the vote go to the people, but the point is that all our annexations were approved until we had the recession hit, at which time actually the voters were voting against annexations.
Right.
All the annexations that were on the ballot at this time, in fact, were passed. So I think the negative votes you saw was the fact of, subdivisions stopping and so forth. And we seem to have turned that corner.
And the size. And the size.
And so, well, we got a 12
Yeah.
acres
Yeah.
annexation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's pretty small.
Industrial, but we do have I have one question though. It seems like it's almost a year before we're operating on this. Is this a standard period or?
No, this took a little bit longer. With the turnover that we've had in staff, we needed to once it's approved by the voters, there's multiple steps that we need to take administratively with other jurisdictions, as well as the Department of Revenue, providing property descriptions, and it took a while to get all 4 of them through that process and then back in front. What's important is that we get it done because it goes on the tax rolls once a year, and so we do have some time in there. If we would have done these in March versus doing them now, it doesn't affect our taxing ability. We will get these on for the next taxing calendar. That's kind of the date that we were shooting for. Historically, we've been able to do them quicker, and I think moving forward, we'll be able to do this much quicker. We've found a consultant that can help us with those legal descriptions.
I was going to ask that question. Is it something we could farm out? And you're saying
and
essentially yes.
That's what we ended up trying. We tried to do it ourselves. We weren't able to, and then we were able to. We hired a consultant to help us with that process.
Okay, very good. Thank you. With that, we're coming to the consent agenda.
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay.
Commissioner Smith?
Aye.
Commissioner Roth?
Aye.
Commissioner Mum?
Aye.
Commissioner Polly?
Aye.
Mayor Neely?
Aye. And then we come to communications, beginning with the city manager.
Thank you, Your Honor. Tonight, Maureen Cole, our library director, has a brief library event announcement.
Are you
okay?
Is the announcement brief or is the event brief?
I could take a while. So let's see. I wanted to remind you that tomorrow night we're having two, not one, but two authors visit the library, Brian Doyle and Virginia Ewer Wolf. And they're both nationally known. Brian wrote Mink River. I don't know if you've read that. It's really good. Anyway.
I'm just coughing. That's what I was doing.
And Virginia Ewer Wolf is nationally recognized like over and over, and she lives in or outside of Oregon City. And it's kind of like one of our local treasures that we don't really know about. And then next week is the big Star Wars Halloween party at the library. Yeah. So I just wanted to put that in front of you, and also say we got our $1,000 check from Ross. Kathy was there. It was so cool. Yeah, for the foundation. It was great. Thanks.
Thank you. These authors that are coming.
Yes.
Are we supposed to be afraid of any of them?
It's Halloween, of course. Yeah.
So, Mayor, if I may. We also have this week a guest that's being sponsored to come to Oregon City and talk about the Mill Ruins Park in downtown Minneapolis on the Mississippi River, where they repurposed an old mill site there. And that his visit is being sponsored by Oregon City and all of its partners on the Willamette Falls Legacy Project. And his name is Tom Meyer. He's an architect with over 40 years of experience. And Tony, do you want to add anything? When he's coming, what he's going to say, what the purpose is?
So, as part of the Willamette Falls Legacy Project, we are sponsoring a professional credits up in Portland on November 5th, and Tom Meyer is one of the speakers that we've brought out for that presentation. As part of that was that we wanted him to come speak to you and the Planning Commission, and we'll open that up then for folks to come and listen as well. It'll be November 4th. It's a Monday from 5:30 to 6:30 here at City Hall in the Commission Chambers. Tom Myers is an award-winning architect, as David was expressing about Mills Ruin in Minneapolis. It was a very successful public project that created substantial private investment along the Mississippi River and industrial area. And he's also on the redevelopment team for Centennial Mills, which is in downtown Portland, owned by the Portland Development Commission. So it'll be a great opportunity to provide lessons learned and thoughts on the potential for the Willamette Falls Legacy Project.
You do the time, date, and venue again.
It will be Monday, November 4th, 5:30 to 6:30 here at City Hall.
Thank you.
Thank you. Also, you wanted to provide a brief update on the sign code master plan update?
Yeah, there was the sign code update is under process. We actually had our second meeting last Monday. We have two more meetings scheduled for November 18th and December 9th. On November 18th, we'll also have an open house. And so we have a citizen advisory team that's looking at the larger goals and objectives of what should be or not changed in the existing city code, as well as we're working with our other departments on funding, appropriate fees, code enforcement aspects of the sign code. And that process is expected to conclude once the citizen advisory team has completed their work. We'll begin workshops, work sessions with the Planning Commission and the City Commission. We'll do our public noticing requirements and then hold our public hearings. And so we do expect that to hopefully end with approval by the City Commission in July, August of 14.
Thank you.
Thank you. Excuse me. Also, at the last commission meeting, I believe it was Commissioner Roth brought up the question about metal pods that are, and we actually have their recruiting brochure right here where they're trying to sell their product. And we did some research on that request, and we discovered that our current membrane ordinance covers more than just membranes. So I'm passing that out. It also covers these products and anything with metal on it, and that would include these. Actually, I think these are made of different things. Some are metal, some are made of some sort of plastic. But anyway, our ordinance does cover it. in the case of when we interpret that ordinance, Mr. Conkle's department sometimes will issue a building permit, and when people are building a new garage or a garage for the first time, like in this case, they will rent one of these, and we've tried to interpret the provisions of the building code so that they can utilize one of these pods till they get done with their building project, so long as they're making substantial and continuous progress on the permit. So at such time as the building permit expires, then we would kick that over to code enforcement. If they're not in the middle of a building project and don't have a building permit, then they're subject to the code right away. So that's the status of that, and I want to make sure that if any of you had questions about the ordinance or how we're interpreting it or using it, you would let us know. But we think it's covered. So if you see these in the community and you're not, especially if you don't think they're affiliated with a building project that's adjacent, please let us know, because we'll follow up on that. So let's see here. The next thing.
So we just have to call code enforcement.
Absolutely. And or if you've got one of these gizmos, take a picture and send it on to us. I know some of you have been really good about doing that. Also, there's going to be on November 4th I believe this is the joint work session with the Planning Commission. Isn't that correct? That's what I have on the agenda here, November 4th.
Yes, that's the time mark. Yeah, the time mark one.
So I just wanted to remind you about that joint work session coming up. And then I'm going to be in Japan on October 25th to November 6th. And Mr. Conkle will be acting city manager while I'm gone. I will have, I do have my iPad on an international plan for those 2 weeks, but there's a pretty big time difference. So if you need to get a hold of me, you're welcome to try, and I will do my best to get back to you. I think they're going to be running us all over the place over there, so I'm not sure how quickly I can get back to you. But the biggest items, I think, facing you on the 6th, of course, you already confronted this evening, and I think did a terrific job with those. So anyway, I'm looking forward to getting over there. I have a lot of responsibilities. I'm a little anxious about what I'm going to say in some of those settings, but I'm got a long plane ride to figure that out ahead of me. So anyway, that's all I have for this evening.
Thank you. Well, I'll go ahead and coming to the Willamette Falls Legacy Project, Mason, Williams, and Cogan, Owens and Cogan hosted a public process, I guess, was that Thursday night? Is that right? Yeah.
Yes, it was.
It was Thursday night, in which they had a series of roundtables where people got together and had discussions. I have never been more impressed with one of those activities in my life. It was well attended. I think there was well over 100 people there. Each table had a facilitator and a note taker. The note taker were students from the University of Minnesota, which I'm going to let Tony Conkle tell us why they were here. But in any case, it was a focus of Oregon City, actually, that they came. From what I could see, the facilitators were doing a great job when it appeared that one of the participants at the table were tending to dominate the discussion. Some people may have observed that occasionally. They pulled it back and so forth. And it was interesting that the number of varied recommendations that were coming from each of those tables. And after the event was over, a good many people were there at those maps and so forth, and having discussions that continue on. A lot of people were excited. One person I knew told me he just opened his water bill that day and he saw the notification. He said, "I got to come to this one," and he was there. But there were several people from West Lynn. I mean, it was well attended, and I think our consultants did a tremendous job, and the staff was very active in putting this together. I want to thank them. And if you have the chance to extend my thanks again to those consultants, I'd really appreciate it.
Thank you.
We had, I guess, it was kind of interesting. One of the facilitators were volunteers, weren't they?
For the most part, we had we pulled in staff from our partners, so we had folks from Metro there.
Right.
Clackamas County were helping as well.
Tony was telling me that one of the facilitators there was from the group that competed with Mason.
Macy.
And there, I mean, obviously the interest in that project is great. Even those people that didn't get the bid are still interested in what's going to happen at that particular
Mayor, I'd like to also mention today when I was at the Rotary Club meeting, John Anderson, who's a former city manager, is, of course, in the club, and he came up to me in the parking lot because Kelly Musburger was there at Rotary today and gave a presentation that was sort of an abbreviated version of what you experienced that evening. And John talked about that same meeting. He said that was, I believe he said that was the best run public meeting experience of that kind that he had ever seen in his career. So that was, I wasn't at the meeting, but it must have been really a home run based on the feedback. And I heard that from other people today at the club meeting as well that were there. So, yeah, good job.
The other thing I wanted to comment on, I went on a trip to Eastern Oregon, basically for the purpose of attending the State Historic Preservation's Office evaluation of our recommendations for nomination of three city nominated sites and one privately nominated sites, they being the elevator, the McLaughlin Promenade, the Carnegie Library, and
that one.
And then
Mo's got that evil look going.
and then Rob Crocker put forward the nomination for the Masonic Lodge.
Oh wow!
I'll tell you, if I had gone through the review on my dissertation that our consultant went through and the proposals that would have put forward, I would probably either just given up the process or committed suicide. One of the two. It was grueling. They had 5 people, all of them expertise in given areas. An ex-ODOT person who knew everything about the Conde Bridges, and which wasn't on, but he just had this tremendous thing, and they all had things to say. Some people criticized the way something was presented, and the next person said, no, that was presented very well, and it helped my understanding, so it was all that kind of things. But some good recommendations were made, but the point is, and all those sites were then voted on and unanimously voted on to take it to go ahead and present the recommendation to the person they call the keeper. I'm not sure what that means, but it sounds like a very exalted position, and that makes a decision.
Magic, it sounds like.
What happens is the staff there from SHPO, that's the State Historic Preservation League of Oregon, they consolidate the comments that are made, and the consultant then revises the proposal. The fact that it's gone forward is almost guarantees that those will be on the national register.
That's great.
So it was very exciting. Came back, we spent the night, my wife went with me, came back that night, the next day, took a little time, went through Baker City, took Highway 7 to 23, and I don't know, people that know tamaracks or larch, they're the only conifer, I think, in the Pacific Northwest that loses its leaves in the fall. They were brilliant yellow. Some of the forests, I swear, were 30% tamarack. I've never seen anything like it. It was a beautiful trip back, and I'm glad that I had the opportunity to go for city reasons and come back and see this beautiful scenery on the way back. And the other thing that impressed me was both LeGrand, Baker City, they always impress me as I go through because they've got their historic main streets. They don't call them Main Street. They have names for them. They've done a great job in preserving them. It's very exciting to go through those communities. They, of course, are on the route of the Oregon Trail as well. And I think it's worthwhile if you have the opportunity and haven't taken it to see some of the other sites along the Oregon Trail and how some of them have done a tremendous job. There's an interpretive center there at Baker City as well. So if you ever have the opportunity to visit those communities, I advise it strongly. They've done a great job. And that's my report. Who else wants to speak?
Me.
Yes, go.
So on Thursday night, when you were at the Willamette Falls Legacy Project, and I heard how great it was, I think I drew the short straw, and I was at the emergency operations for elected and appointed officials. But it was ran very well. maybe not as exciting as what you, but it was good. And it's great to see how the county partners with all the cities to make sure that we have a plan. It was great to see their headquarters. And thank you for the exercise tonight. It was good, the emergency. And we do have a new Main Street manager. I'm sure all of you have seen the
I'm
press release.
excited.
His name is Jonathan Stone, and I was hoping he'd come tonight, but we'll have to get him up here. And he is digging right in. I know he's going to be on the sign code update citizen advisory group. And there's going to be a little meet and greet for him later on this week. And we're just really excited for him to get going. He's getting out there and meeting the business owners and getting right to work.
That's great.
That's all I have.
Anybody else with a report?
I have
Yes,
one.
go
I
ahead.
attended the ribbon cutting ceremony for Ross.
Dress for Less.
Yes,
Dress
I did
for
my
Less on
part.
Saturday.
We went
There
down
were
there.
people lined up an hour ahead of time, even though they'd been there open the day before.
Yeah.
So I didn't understand that part, but it was very well attended, and people were very excited to have them in town. Found out found out some interesting statistics. There are 1,200 Ross stores in the United States. They also own a company called Didi's, and so it brings it to 1,350. The Oregon City store is going to employ right now about 90 people.
Wow.
So, and they're one of the top Fortune 300 companies.
That's wonderful.
That's great.
That was very good. And then I had to spend money.
Of course.
Was it reimbursable? Anybody else?
Mayor, I had one final comment. There is going to be a welcome reception for Jonathan Stone tomorrow at Nebbiolo, I believe at 4:30.
Mm-hmm.
So if
And
anybody
where is it at?
At Nebbiolo downtown.
On Main Street.
4:30?
Yep.
4:30 tomorrow.
Yeah, staff, do not be embarrassed to correct me. Tony Conkle did it very silently. I was using the name, what was it? Mason Williams, who was a singer,
Guitar
several
player.
years ago.
Yeah.
Guitar player, Mason Williams. What was that he did? That was so great.
Classical gas.
Classical gas. The consultant is not Mason Williams. It's
Walker Macy.
Walker Macy. I got the initials right, but they were in the wrong order. So anyway, so don't make a mistake. I might be a little embarrassed, but please correct me so we can correct it for the record, if no other reason.
I will be louder next time.
Yeah, that's right.
Thank you.